Welcome back to Disclosures and Consequences, the podcast where we talk about what actually happens when the fine print gets ignored. I'm your host, Jason Piske, real estate risk management expert, and today we're talking about one of the biggest liability blind spots in California real estate, HOA documents. And let me say this up front. HOA disclosures are not just another PDF stack to upload into the MLS and forget about. They're often 150 pages, 300 pages, sometimes over 500 pages of financials, meeting minutes, insurance summaries, architectural rules, reserve studies, and because of that, most agents don't read them. Not because they're lazy, because they're overwhelmed. And honestly, many agents are afraid to touch them at all because just like the avid, once you start interpreting financial statements or predicting what an HOA might do, you can step into territory that creates risk for you. Or, like the NHD, they don't say anything at all, turn over the paperwork, and let the buyer try to read hundreds of legalese on their own and hope that nothing comes back later. And that's where problems start. I find more issues and flags in HOA documents than all other disclosures combined. So instead of trying to tackle everything at once, today we're focusing on one section that I believe creates more surprises for buyers and more risk for agents than almost anything else inside an HOA disclosure package: the meeting minutes. Now, I know as soon as I say meeting minutes, half of you are already thinking about those long, repetitive pages that feel like administrative filler. They don't look exciting, they don't look urgent, and most of the time, they don't feel like something is going to impact your transaction today. But after reviewing hundreds of HOA packages, I can tell you that the real story of a community usually isn't in the summary pages. It's buried inside those conversations that most people scroll past. And this isn't about turning you into an HOA expert or asking you to interpret financial statements or predict what a board is going to do next year. It's about awareness, because what shows up in meeting minutes often gives you a preview of issues that haven't become official disclosures yet. And that's where expectations can start to break down for buyers after the close of escrow. When agents open an HOA package, most of us are trained to look for the quick wins first: the rules, the budget summary, the insurance information, maybe the reserve percentage if it's easy to find. We're trying to get a general feel for the health of the community without getting lost in the weeds. And honestly, that makes sense because time is limited and these packages are massive. The meeting minutes, though, tend to sit at the bottom of the pile. They feel long, repetitive, sometimes even a little disorganized depending on how the management company operates and prepares them. You'll see discussions about landscaping, parking complaints, someone arguing about paint colors or noise issues. And after a few pages, it's really easy to assume that nothing important is happening there. So what I see over and over again is agents delivering the documents, checking the disclosure box, and moving on without really spending time in that section. But here's the thing: the meeting minutes are often the only place where you see what the board is actually talking about in real time. They're not polished marketing material. They're not written to make the community look perfect. They're just a record of conversations, and those conversations can reveal patterns that haven't yet made their way into formal disclosures. You might see the same repair being mentioned month after month, or discussions about rising insurance costs. I see that a lot. Or early conversations about projects that are still being evaluated. Nothing's finalized, nothing's official, which is exactly why they're easy to overlook. But from a risk standpoint, that's where a lot of future surprises begin. Because buyers aren't always upset about the issue itself. They're upset when they feel like there were clues that nobody pointed out before they closed. And again, this isn't about interpreting or predicting outcomes. It's about recognizing that those pages are often the most honest snapshot of what's happening inside the community at that moment, and that awareness alone can change how you guide your clients through the process. Here's a real-world story where an agent didn't read the meeting minutes closely, and it turned into arbitration after the fact. In downtown San Diego sits the El Cortez, a 100-year-old 16-story condominium building that was originally a hotel and is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's iconic and sought after by buyers that want a unique downtown living experience. The unit in question happened to overlook Balboa Park, where the San Diego Zoo is, and at the time they bought, they paid $10,000 over asking in order to secure this unique home. The disclosures were delivered, and then the HOA documents came in. The buyer's agent skimmed through the financials and the rules regarding pets and parking and whatnot, but didn't dig into the meeting minutes. Escrow closes and everyone is happy until 3 weeks later when the new homeowner goes to an HOA meeting. They find out that the outdoor pool was being closed. When they asked why, they found out that the lot had been subdivided and a 12 to 13-story condo tower was going to be built, blocking their view of the park, not to mention the loss of the amenities like the pool, and close proximity to the new building, and loss of that unique charm that drew them to buy in the building in the first place. The design had been approved 2 years earlier, and the seller knew about it but didn't disclose accurately enough. Here's where the buyer's agent started to get worried. The HOA documents, the ones they skimmed over. The meeting minutes provided had numerous references to the proposed construction, the timelines, and what the HOA was doing to try to stop the building from being built. The buyer called their agent to ask what was known. Why didn't the agent know that there was a building proposed on the site? What could the buyer do now? They didn't want to sell because they feared they could lose money and that no one would want to buy under these circumstances. They certainly would not have paid over asking if they'd even made an offer at all had they known. Ultimately, this did go to arbitration because the seller claimed they disclosed properly. The buyer was looking to recover the $10,000 over asking, and ultimately, that's what they were awarded. This one hits home for me because I was that buyer's agent. I had worked hard to get us in that building. Everything was going perfect. When the 400 pages of paperwork from the HOA hit my inbox, I did what most agents do. I skimmed, and I assumed everything would be fine. I can tell you never again, not for me at least. Since then, I've found pending special assessments not previously disclosed elsewhere, pending lawsuits, HOAs that are overly aggressive with fines, HOAs that are barely hanging on with literally only one person on the board, and that person was the one selling, insurance premiums doubling or being canceled outright, condo complexes trying to meet California balcony law requirements in time. The meeting minutes will literally tell you the story of the day-to-day life in the community if you take the time to read it. And here's the part I want to be very clear about, because I know some of you are listening and thinking, Jason, are you telling me I have to read every single page of every HOA package now? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. This isn't about turning you into an HOA analyst, and it's definitely not about interpreting financials or predicting how a board is going to behave 6 months from now. That's where agents can accidentally step outside their lane and create risk for themselves. But there is a difference between interpretation and awareness. What changed for me after that experience at El Cortez wasn't that I suddenly became an HOA expert. It was that I stopped assuming the important information would always be summarized somewhere. Because the reality is, some of the most meaningful details don't show up in neat bullet points. They show up in conversations, in repeated discussions, in little notes buried halfway through a set of minutes that most people never open. And once you start looking at meeting minutes through that lens, you realize they're less about technical analysis and more about patterns. Is the same issue being discussed over and over again? Is the board constantly talking about insurance problems? Are owners frustrated about enforcement? Are contractors being brought in repeatedly for the same repairs? None of that requires you to interpret anything. It just requires you to notice when something bigger than a one-time conversation is happening. Because what tends to happen after escrow closes is that buyers don't remember the hundreds of pages they signed. What they remember is whether they felt prepared. And when something comes up later that was discussed months earlier inside the minutes, that's when the uncomfortable questions start. What did my agent know? What should I have known? And that's not a place any of us want to be. Now, I also want to say this. Meeting minutes don't always mean something bad is coming. Sometimes they just reflect normal HOA life. People arguing about landscaping, complaints about parking, debates about noise or pool hours or paint colors. That's normal. Every community has friction. So this isn't about turning every discussion into a red flag. It's about context. If something shows up once, it might just be noise. If it shows up 5 meetings in a row, that's a storyline. And storylines matter because they help set expectations for your clients. And if you've already had the conversation with them, it hits differently than if they didn't know about it at all. The truth is, most problems in an HOA don't start with a lawsuit or a special assessment or a headline in the news. They start quietly in conversations, a note in the minutes, a discussion that feels unfinished, a project that hasn't been approved yet but keeps coming up month after month. And when nobody reads those conversations, buyers walk into communities with expectations that don't match reality. And that's when the consequences show up long after the disclosures have been signed. But today was only part 1, because the meeting minutes tell you the story. The financials tell you whether they can afford the next chapter or not. In the next episode, we're going deeper into HOA budgets, reserve studies, and the risk signals most agents aren't sure how to look at without stepping outside their role. As always, I'm Jason Piske of House Owl. Whether you're looking for brokerage risk management training or independent document review to help you and your clients navigate the parts of a disclosure package that often get overlooked, you can find more information at myhouseowl.com. And remember, it's not the disclosures, it's the consequences. See you next time.